NUMSA Deputy General Secretary Karl Cloete, of course, NUMSA, the biggest union within the new federation, SAFTU, that was spearheading today's protest action. Are you happy with what happened?
I think we're completely satisfied, even though we know that there's a current bus strike underway. The turnout was tremendous, so we're completely happy.
How do you gauge turnout? Do you have an idea across the country how many people attended?
It would be difficult to say, but if you look at the images in Cape Town, Johannesburg, Bloemfontein, KwaZulu-Natal, masses of what one could call a Red Sea in the streets. Of course, you have a difficulty if you have to transport people from far-flung areas. And as I say, the bus strike had an impact on the number of people that could join. If you were in the center of the city of Johannesburg this morning, you would have seen the dead silence, no movement of people, vehicles or any type of transport around the city.
SAFTU is, this is your first big mass nationwide protest. Are you still learning how to do things like that, bus people in, or was that just not possible because of the bus driver strike?
Well,
would it have helped you if you have those sort of resources?
Well, we have a history of organizing and mobilizing workers since the 80s.
Does, yeah.
And we negotiated with PRASA, we negotiated with taxi associations to ferry people, and we, as I say, completely satisfied with the turnout under the circumstances of the bus strike.
Could it be close to, we had someone in yesterday talking about 800,000 people?
Well, you would never realistically get 800,000 people on the street. There would be those.
That's your full reach, you believe?
Well, that's the SAFTU membership of 23 unions affiliated to SAFTU. You would always have in any action people that would prefer going to the march and others that would simply stay away from work because this was a protected strike.
In terms of the demands, 3,500 rand, what do you say to those who say at least government's trying to do something? We haven't had a minimum wage. 3,500, a start in a country with massive unemployment, with many people who are earning nothing, never mind just the basic minimum.
Well, one should, as a start, begin with the fact that SAFTU or NUMSA and the other affiliates do not reject a national minimum wage. In fact, we have been advocating for a national minimum wage, drawing on the 1955 Freedom Charter resolution, which called for a national minimum wage. So we're supportive of the minimum wage. What we argue is the quantum. Now,
you're asking for about 4 times what has been deemed feasible.
We think that a starting point must certainly be under which levels in terms of poverty can you not sustain a family or a household of 5 people. Transport to work, food, in other words, a minimum that would sustain your livelihood. Now, of course, SAFTU, as you know, had been prevented by the other federations, business and government, to be part and form part of NEDLAC. We would have advocated our position. We would have presented the research that would tell us exactly what is possible if we want to address the question of poverty, as you say.
And some would say this is part of a push to get yourself out there, to compete with COSATU, to get onto NEDLAC, to become a player. Do you think you achieved something like that?
We think it's propaganda. It should be remembered that NUMSA got expelled from COSATU. We wanted to stay in COSATU because NUMSA was there in December 1985 when we launched the federation and Jay Naidu at the time became the General Secretary. You would remember we went to court to prevent COSATU from dismissing us. None of that helped. And of course the alliance partners did not assist in any way. In fact, they contributed to our dismissal. So we're not in a game of standoff. We are representing the interest of workers.
Mr. Cloete, I was going to say, why is it propaganda? Why can't you say, yes, we want to compete? Obviously, you want workers to look at the two trade union federations and say, okay, we want to be part of that one.
This is the problem. Workers' organizations or trade unions should not compete for space. If you look at the density of trade unionism in South Africa, COSATU, NACTU, SAFTU, FEDUSA, CONSAU represent only 23% of workers who are unionized in the South African economy.
So you should be extending.
And therefore we should be extending. There's no reason why there should be a competition. In fact, a competition and division of workers plays into the hands of the bosses.
Okay, very quickly, because I want to ask you what next, but we heard some reports of intimidation this morning. Honestly, how do you think this march was handled by the people involved?
Well, the first thing we should say, we did not expect the numbers as big as it was. It was massive. We should have probably had more marshals, but as I sit here, there's no report that I've received of incidents of intimidation. But in the final analysis, we stand for the freedom to associate, and no one should intimidate any person who decides to participate or not to participate.
We haven't been able to go into it, the assertion today that you were fighting for trade unionism itself because of the threat of labour laws. Tell me very quickly, what is your number one issue besides minimum wage, and what are you going to do now?
We think it's completely wrong for the government and the state to want to intervene in a process essentially of collective bargaining between employer and employees. We must be allowed, when we bargain collectively, to work towards a settlement of the issues. And if we disagree, the Constitution in South Africa provides us the right to strike. And this is the bone of contention.
The bone of contention is that the majority holds sway, and if a dissenting union has a different voice, they can't organize a minority strike, basically.
Historically, way back in the 80s, in the 90s, and now, we've had a trade union that would negotiate and bargain on behalf of its members. It would report back to its own members, and the members will decide through structural meetings whether to settle or to go on strike, and that's all we're asking for.
This has been a long debate. The minimum wage has been a long debate, finally implemented. I don't see massive changes happening. Then you're not getting what you want. Then what will happen?
Well, this is not a one-day struggle. It's an ongoing struggle. If I can draw parallels, we have fought apartheid for many, many, many years and decades. And we are very firm that the battle against the labour law amendments and what we want to see as a decent national minimum wage is an important one that we're taking forward.
And is it justified to shut down some companies to affect people who may be going just to make the bare bones to live off? Because you do affect the economy with action like this.
Well, of course. I mean, the issue of a struggle or a strike is about power relations between employees, trade unions, employers and employer organizations. And this is the only weapon we have. We have nothing else, and we do so peacefully.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Cloete from the biggest union within the Union Federation, SAFTU, and he's from NUMSA. Over to you, Bob.